I should have known something was wrong when she insisted on a destination wedding. Sarah had always been practical about money, the kind of woman who clipped coupons and bought generic cereal. But suddenly she wanted Tuscany, wanted the vineyard, wanted everything to be perfect. I thought it was just nerves. Every bride gets a little crazy, right? We'd been together for 5 years. 5 years of Sunday morning coffee, of her stealing my hoodies, of planning our future kids' names. Sarah was everything I thought I wanted in a wife. Quiet, devoted, the kind of woman who remembered your mother's birthday and never complained when you worked late. She had this way of looking at me like I was the only man in the world, these big brown eyes that seemed to hold nothing but love and trust. I remember the first time I saw her. It was at a bookstore downtown, one of those cramped little places that smell like old paper and forgotten dreams. She was reading Neruda, her lips moving slightly as she mouthed the words. When she looked up and caught me staring, she blushed this deep red that made her freckles stand out like stars. I bought her coffee that day, and we talked for 4 hours about poetry and philosophy and whether dogs could feel guilt. She laughed at my terrible jokes and didn't judge me when I admitted I'd never read Proust. That was Sarah, or at least that was the Sarah I thought I knew. The wedding was beautiful. I have to give her that. The villa overlooked rolling hills covered in olive groves, and the September sun cast everything in golden light. Our families had flown in from across the country. My college roommate Mark was my best man, and Sarah's sister Emma was maid of honor. Everything was perfect, Instagram ready, the kind of wedding that would make other couples jealous. Sarah looked stunning in her dress. It was simple, elegant, nothing too flashy. She'd insisted on buying it off the rack instead of getting something custom made. "I don't need to spend $3,000 to look beautiful for you," she'd said, and I'd fallen in love with her all over again for saying it. The ceremony was at 4 in the afternoon. I stood at the altar watching her walk down the aisle, her father's arms steady beneath hers, and I thought about how lucky I was. This woman had chosen me out of all the men in the world. She'd said yes when I'd proposed on the beach in Maine, had cried happy tears and called her mother immediately. We'd spent the last year planning this day, arguing over flower arrangements and seating charts, and now it was finally here. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves. Sarah's were beautiful, full of promises about growing old together and supporting each other's dreams. Mine were more practical, about being her safe harbor and her best friend. When I slipped the ring on her finger, her hand was shaking. "I do," she said, and her voice cracked just a little. "I do," I replied, and kissed my wife for the first time. The reception was everything we'd planned. The food was incredible, the wine flowed freely, and everyone seemed to be having a good time. Sarah's grandmother danced with my grandfather, and my drunk uncle gave a speech that made everyone laugh. I remember thinking this was it. This was the beginning of our real life together. But Sarah seemed distracted. She kept checking her phone, which was strange because she'd been adamant about having an unplugged wedding. "I want to be present," she'd said during the planning. "I want to remember every moment." Yet there she was, glancing at her screen every few minutes, her smile flickering like a candle in the wind. "Everything okay?" I asked her during our first dance. "Of course," she said, but she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "I'm just tired. It's been a long day." I should have pressed her, should have asked more questions, but I was caught up in the moment, in the fairy tale of it all. My beautiful wife in my arms, our future stretching out before us like an endless summer. The first real sign something was wrong came around 10 o'clock. Sarah's phone buzzed during toasts, and she practically lunged for it. I saw her face change as she read whatever message she'd received. The color drained from her cheeks, and for a moment she looked genuinely panicked. "Who is it?" I asked. "Just Emma," she said quickly, slipping the phone back into her purse. She wanted to know when we're cutting the cake. But Emma was sitting 3 tables over, clearly visible and definitely not on her phone. Looking back, I can see all the signs I missed. The way Sarah had insisted on handling all the wedding planning herself, claiming she wanted to surprise me. The way she'd been secretive about certain vendor meetings, always going alone. The way she'd started working late more often in the months leading up to the wedding, coming home with stories about demanding clients and impossible deadlines. I thought she was just stressed. Wedding planning is overwhelming, and Sarah was the type to take on too much rather than ask for help. She'd been distant lately, less affectionate, but I chalked it up to pre-wedding jitters. A lot of couples go through rough patches before major life events. The cake cutting went smoothly. Sarah smiled for the photographer, fed me a bite of lemon cake without smashing it in my face like I'd feared she might. We posed for more pictures, danced to a few more songs, and I started to relax. Maybe I'd been imagining things. Maybe she really was just tired. But then she disappeared. I was talking to my cousin about his new job when I realized I hadn't seen Sarah in 20 minutes. I asked Emma if she'd seen her, and she looked genuinely confused. "I thought she was with you," Emma said. I checked the bridal suite upstairs. Empty. I asked the wedding planner, the caterers, even the photographer. No one had seen my wife. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. That's when I started to panic. My mind went to all the worst-case scenarios. Had she been kidnapped? Had she fallen and hurt herself? Was she sick? I was about to call the police when Mark grabbed my arm. "Dude," he said, his voice strange, "you need to see this." He led me to the parking area behind the villa. There, parked between my rental car and the catering van, was a black BMW I didn't recognize. The windows were tinted, but there was definitely movement inside. "I was coming out for a smoke," Mark said quietly, "and I saw her get in." My heart stopped. Saw who get in? But I already knew. Of course I knew. I approached the car slowly, my legs feeling like they were made of concrete. The driver's side window was cracked open, and I could hear voices inside. Sarah's voice, low and urgent. "We can't keep doing this," she was saying. "Not tonight, not on my wedding day." "You're the one who texted me," came a man's voice, deep, familiar somehow, though I couldn't place it. "You're the one who said you needed to see me one more time." I crept closer, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they'd hear it. Through the gap in the window, I could see Sarah's profile, her wedding dress bunched up around her hips. She was straddling someone, her movements slow and deliberate. "This is insane," the man said, but his hands were on her waist, pulling her closer. "You just got married an hour ago." "I know," Sarah breathed. "I know it's crazy, but I couldn't go through with it without seeing you one more time, without saying goodbye properly." That's when I recognized the voice. It was David, the wedding photographer we'd hired. The one Sarah had insisted on, even though he was way over our budget. The one she'd had multiple planning sessions with. The one who'd been taking candid shots all day. Who'd been there for every intimate moment. I watched my wife of 2 hours fuck another man in the parking lot of our wedding venue. I don't remember making the decision to confront them. One moment I was standing there in shock. The next I was yanking open the car door. "What the hell is this?" I shouted. Sarah screamed and scrambled off David's lap, trying to pull her dress down. David fumbled with his pants, his face red with embarrassment and fear. "Michael, I can explain," Sarah started, but I was already backing away. "5 years," I said, my voice shaking. 5 fucking years." "It's not what you think," she said, climbing out of the car. Her hair was messed up, her lipstick smeared. She looked nothing like the angel who'd walked down the aisle a few hours earlier. "Really?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Because it looks like my wife is fucking the wedding photographer on our wedding day." David had managed to get his pants back on and was trying to slip away, but I blocked his path. "How long?" I demanded. "Michael, please," Sarah said, reaching for me. I jerked away from her touch. "How long?" I repeated, staring at David. 6 months, he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. 6 months. The entire time we'd been planning our wedding, she'd been cheating on me. Every time she'd come home late from a vendor meeting, every time she'd been secretive about the planning, every time she'd been distant and distracted. "Were you laughing at me?" I asked her. "This whole time, were you laughing at me?" "No," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Michael, I love you, I do. This thing with David, it's just physical. It doesn't mean anything." "It doesn't mean anything?" I stared at her in disbelief. "You're fucking another man on our wedding day and it doesn't mean anything." "I tried to end it," she said desperately. "I really did, but I couldn't. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at this woman I'd thought I knew, this woman I'd planned to spend my life with, and I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. The Sarah I'd fallen in love with didn't exist. She'd never existed. For 5 years, I'd been in love with a lie. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out. Get out of my sight. Go back to the hotel, pack your things, and get out. Michael, we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can. There is no we, I exploded. There's never been a we. There's been me stupidly in love with someone who doesn't exist. And there's been you pretending to be someone you're not while you fuck other men behind my back. I never pretended, she said, her voice small. I am that person. I am the person who loves you. No, I said, the person who loves me wouldn't be here right now. The person who loves me wouldn't have spent the last 6 months lying to my face. The person who loves me wouldn't have walked down the aisle today knowing she was going to betray me before the night was over. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in her wedding dress, crying in a parking lot next to the man she'd chosen over me. The hardest part was going back in on. Our families were still there, still celebrating, still believing in the fairy tale. I had to smile and pretend everything was fine while I figured out what to do next. I couldn't ruin everyone's evening. These people had traveled thousands of miles to be here, had spent money on hotels and flights and wedding gifts. So I lied. I told people Sarah wasn't feeling well, that she'd gone to lie down. I danced with my mother and my new mother-in-law. I thanked people for coming. I played the part of the happy groom, all while my world was falling apart. Mark knew something was wrong. He kept shooting me concerned looks, but I couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not here. The party finally ended around midnight. I helped clean up, loaded wedding gifts into cars, said goodbye to relatives I might never see again. Through it all, I kept expecting Sarah to come back, to try to explain, to fight for us. But she didn't. She'd simply vanished, leaving me to handle the aftermath alone. I didn't go back to the hotel that night. Instead, I drove to the coast and sat on the beach until dawn, still in my wedding suit, trying to process what had happened. The waves crashed against the shore in endless rhythm, and I thought about how I'd imagined bringing Sarah here for our honeymoon morning. We'd planned to wake up early, walk on the beach, maybe grab breakfast at that little cafe in town. Instead, I was alone watching the sunrise on what should have been the happiest day of my life. When I finally returned to the hotel, Sarah was gone. She'd packed her things and left a note on the pillow. I'm sorry, it said. I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't expect you to. I know I've destroyed everything good between us. I don't know why I did it. I don't know how to explain it. I just want you to know that I did love you. I do love you. That was never a lie. I crumpled up the note and threw it into the trash. The next few days were a blur of logistics, canceling the honeymoon, returning wedding gifts, dealing with vendors who wanted to be paid. I had to call my family, her family, our friends. I had to explain over and over that the marriage was over before it had really begun. Sarah's mother cried when I called her. I don't understand, she kept saying. She was so happy. She seemed so happy. I didn't tell her about David. I didn't tell her about the car. I just said we'd realized we weren't compatible, that we'd made a mistake. Let her think it was mutual. Let her think her daughter was better than she was. The divorce was surprisingly easy. Sarah didn't fight me on anything. She signed whatever papers I put in front of her, agreed to whatever terms I proposed. I think she was relieved, actually. Relieved that she didn't have to pretend anymore. But I wasn't done. I couldn't be done. Not after what she'd put me through. I started with David. A few anonymous tips to his professional associations about inappropriate conduct with clients. Some carefully worded reviews on his business page mentioning his unprofessional behavior and boundary issues. Within 3 months, his wedding photography business was dead. Then I turned my attention to Sarah. I knew her weaknesses, her secrets, her fears. I knew she'd been skimming money from her company's petty cash fund to pay for her expensive tastes. I knew she'd lied on her resume about her college GPA. I knew she'd been having an affair with her boss 2 years ago, before David. I didn't have to do much. Just a few phone calls, a few emails, a few carefully placed words. Her boss found out about the missing money. Her professional references started getting calls about her character issues. Her new apartment application was mysteriously rejected when the landlord learned about her history of dishonesty. I watched her life fall apart from a distance, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, no pity. Just a cold, empty feeling where my heart used to be. The last time I saw Sarah was 6 months after the wedding. I was at a coffee shop downtown, the same one where we'd had our first date, when she walked in. She looked terrible, thin, exhausted, her hair limp, and her eyes hollow. She saw me and froze. "Michael," she said softly. "Sarah." We stared at each other across the crowded cafe, and I saw everything in her face. The guilt, the regret, the knowledge of what she'd lost, but also something else. Fear. "I know what you did," she said quietly. "To David. To me. I know it was you." I didn't deny it. What was the point? "You destroyed my life," she continued. "No," I said. "You destroyed your life. I just helped it along." She stood there for a long moment, and I thought she might cry. But she didn't. Instead, she just nodded slowly. "I guess I deserved it," she said. "Yeah," I agreed. "You did." She turned and walked out, and I never saw her again. That was 3 years ago. I've moved on, mostly. I date sometimes, though I'm careful now. Suspicious. I don't trust easily, and I probably never will again. The woman I thought I'd spend my life with turned out to be a stranger. And that changes you. It changes how you see people, how you see yourself. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never gone to that parking lot, if I just stayed at the reception, oblivious and happy. Would Sarah have ended it with David? Would we have had kids, grown old together, lived the life we'd planned? But then I remember her face in that car, the way she moved against him, the way she said goodbye. She wasn't ending anything. She was just getting started. I tell myself I'm better off without her, that I'm lucky I found out when I did, before we had children, before we'd built a life together that would have been harder to tear apart. I tell myself that the Sarah I loved never existed, that I was mourning a ghost. Most days I even believe it. But sometimes, late at night, I think about that woman in the bookstore reading Neruda, the one who blushed when I caught her staring. I think about Sunday morning coffee and stolen hoodies and the way she used to look at me like I was the only man in the world. And I wonder if maybe, just maybe, that woman was real. And if she was, what happened to her? When did she disappear? When did she become the stranger who destroyed everything we'd built together? I guess I'll never know. Some questions don't have answers, and some people aren't who they seem to be. The best you can do is protect yourself, learn from your mistakes, and hope that next time, you'll be smarter. Next time, you'll see it coming. The wedding photos arrived 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. David had apparently finished editing them before his business collapsed, and some automated system had sent them to the address on file. I almost threw them away without looking, but something made me open the package. They were beautiful, professional, artistic, everything we'd paid for. Sarah looked radiant in every shot, and I looked happy, genuinely happy. You'd never know from looking at these pictures that the marriage would be over before the reception ended. I kept one photo. It's of Sarah and me during our first dance, her head on my shoulder, both of us smiling. We looked so young, so hopeful, so completely unaware of what was coming. I keep it in my desk drawer, not out of nostalgia or lingering affection, but as a reminder that people aren't always who they seem to be, that love isn't always enough, that sometimes the person you trust most in the world is the one who will hurt you the most. And sometimes late at night when I'm lying in bed alone, I take out that photo and I remember what it felt like to believe in forever, what it felt like to trust someone completely, what it felt like to be that naive, hopeful man who thought he was marrying his best friend. Then I put the photo back in the drawer and close it, and I remind myself that he's gone. That man died in a parking lot in Tuscany, and I'm what's left. Harder, wiser, more careful, less willing to believe in fairy tales. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe that's what growing up really means. Learning that the world isn't as kind as you thought it was, and that the people you love aren't always who they pretend to be. And maybe, if I'm very lucky, someday I'll meet someone who proves me wrong. Someone who shows me that not everyone is Sarah, that not every love story ends in betrayal. But until then, I'll keep that photo in my drawer, a reminder of who I used to be and why I can never be that person again.